Hello everybody, welcome to our week 3. This week we're going to be talking about integral inquiry. Integral inquiry, the texts that I'm really referring to here in particular are by William Braud and Rosemary Anderson, and integral inquiry itself was really developed by Dr. William Braud. He was a professor emeritus at ITP Sophia University. He taught there for over 17 years before retiring, and passing not too long ago, a few years ago. So the texts are Transforming Self and Others Through Research, Transpersonal Research Methods and Skills for the Human Sciences and Humanities. That's the main book, the chapters that we're using for intuitive inquiry and integral inquiry. The first version of this book, actually, though, was Transpersonal Research Methods for the Social Sciences, Honoring Human Experience. And here you can see the main text, which is bigger, and then the smaller image is the first version of that book. William Braud talks about integral inquiry coming really from two experiences that he had. The first of which was an experience discussing with faculty at ITP what it might look like if research covered the 6 main areas that are held within the ITP, the old ITP curriculum, which was intellect, emotion, somatic awareness, expressive arts, body, social, and how would research or what it would look like if it honored all those types of knowing or awareness or epistemologies that come from those different areas, not just the intellectual head-based or logical thinking processes. So during that discussion and another experience, this idea of a different way of approaching research started to emerge. The second experience that he had was at a particular symposium that he writes about in the book, and in that I like this quote that he says. He says, "Any experience could be approached in terms of the nature of the experience itself, how it might be conceptualized, and how those conceptualizations may have changed through time, how the experience might unfold and develop, what might accompany the experience, and which conditions might facilitate or impede the experience." So in other words, it's process and atmosphere. And finally, and what it might be the experience's outcomes or fruits. And when this kind of epiphany came to him, then he realized that he was really developing a new way of approaching research, which he then called integral inquiry. So integral inquiry can really, like intuitive inquiry, be viewed as more of an umbrella or a broader approach to research. Whereas other methods, or even using the term method, those are really tools of working with data and data analysis. So there's the larger umbrella term and then the tools within that umbrella term. And so within intuitive inquiry or integral inquiry, and here let's just talk about integral inquiry. Within integral inquiry, you might use, for example, a quasi-experimental or correlational design, comparing scores on different measures for a particular group. For example, does a group who are depressed also show signs of lack of desire to practice their spiritual practices? You figure out some measures to measure those two different constructs and then give them. But in addition to that, you might also incorporate other tools such as interviewing individuals who are depressed to see if they have a desire or a lack of desire to practice their spiritual practices. And then that information can be used in a qualitative analysis. So the point is that you're using different tools to get at your research question. And the way that you approach that is the larger perspective of approaching that topic would be called integral inquiry, even though the tools themselves would be, quasi-experimental or correlational design, along with qualitative analysis of interview data. So what I'm really talking about is integral inquiry is very pragmatic. It uses what works when you're trying to find particular data on a question and analyze that data in order to answer the questions about a topic. It's very pragmatic. It's integral in that it combines different ways of approaching the data collection and the analysis. It's also integral in that it honors different epistemologies or ways of viewing knowledge or what we value as knowledge. And it looks at a topic from many different vantage points. You may hear terms like triangulation in different texts, although William Braud doesn't really use that term much. But triangulation is really looking at a particular experience, human experience, from different perspectives and using different data sets to triangulate what's actually going on with a particular experience. So that's definitely an aspect of integral inquiry, is looking at a particular topic from different vantage points. In this text, Dr. Braud goes on to talk about the how integral inquiry integrates in inclusion, or how he comes to that term of integration. He says that this type of research will simultaneously provide opportunities for knowledge gain for the discipline, benefits for the research participants, and potentially psychospiritual growth for the researcher, and maybe even the research participants, or even the readers of the study once all the study has been written up. So right there you can see that we're looking at different levels of the research itself. You have the level of the specific benefit to the field of study. Going back to my prior experience, example regarding depression and spiritual practices, the discipline having to do with depression, or spiritual directors might even read that. So that topic, that discipline, would gain from the research that's been being done on that topic. But an integral inquiry is not just going to focus on that level of professional gain. It's also going to look at what's happening for the participants and what's happening for the researcher as that study is being done. And that way it's inclusive. Another way, number 2, is that you can gain a greater understanding of the topic, possibly through looking at the nature of the experience, the history and conceptualization of that experience, or the constructs or variables related to that experience. By looking at the dynamic unfolding and processes that facilitate or inhibit the experience, and look at the outcomes or fruits or after effects of that experience. So this actually goes back to the epiphany or aha that he had at the symposium of these 4 different pieces that are all the different layers that can all be addressed here when looking at a human experience. And a third way that it is inclusive or integrative is that this research will incorporate many forms of knowing or being or doing, including the conventional, analytical, tacit, somatic or body-oriented ways of knowing, feeling or emotional, potential direct forms of knowing, ordinary and non-ordinary states of consciousness, analytical, linear, and non-analytical or non-linear ways of working with the data, and alternative ways of expressing the findings. Note, this is important, particularly when people start critiquing transpersonal approaches to research. We are not talking about the giving up of analytical or logical forms of thinking, but rather using this and incorporating non-analytical, symbolic, tacit, somatic, etc. ways of investigating a topic, its processes, and its outcomes. So it's not the foregoing of the head, so to speak, but incorporating the body along with the head and the head analysis, if that makes sense. And yes, formal literature review and analysis of empirical research is still important and still utilized with this research. This method, just as it is with intuitive inquiry, just as it should be with any research method. You need to be reviewing the extant literature if you are conducting valid research and progressing the topic area that you are studying within. Now, William Braud talks about two specific challenges. I think you may come up with some additional challenges, but the two that he specifically talks about in this chapter are that when you're dealing with many potential methods or tools, you are also talking about needing to have, as a researcher, many different skills or skill sets. If you are doing a, for example, mixed method within integral inquiry, if you're doing a correlational design and then interviewing people, you have to have the skills that a quantitative person would have when doing the correlational design, administering surveys or measures, and conducting data analysis on that numeric data and making sense of it in an appropriate way. And then you also need to be able to have valid and strong interviewing skills and qualitative analysis skills when you're analyzing the texts that you're going to get from those interviews. So, and then if you're incorporating other types of tools, then for each tool you incorporate, you need to have a solid way of working with that data and the data analysis. If you don't, then the whole thing either starts to fall apart or it becomes very surfacey, or the conclusions you make can be in one way to phrase it would be fragile. So you need to have adequate skill sets if you're integrating different tools or different methods within the integral inquiry umbrella. And that actually goes for any research method, whether it's mixed methods or narrative or purely quantitative. As a researcher, you need to have the skill set, or you need to learn the skill set that you're going to be using for your research. So the second challenge is that because of the deep personal meaning that is often associated with the topics that are chosen for integral inquiry, often a person, the researcher, is going through an inner exploration of that topic and their own association and affiliation with that topic and their own growth around that, as well as the external exploration of interviewing people and doing the survey collection or whatever it is that is being done for that particular research. So there's the inner and the outer that's happening at the same time, and you need to be able to balance that as a researcher, not let one completely take over. And you need to let them inform each other as well as you're going through the research process. So that balancing act becomes vital and important, particularly for integral inquiry. Another way to work with the challenge in number one, the many methods and many skills, one thing that one person could do is that person could have multiple researchers that have the different skill sets. So that is one thing that you might consider if you are doing group research. And what skill sets do people bring to the table when you're putting your group together? You might have some person that's really good at statistics and another person who's really good at doing interviews and doing textual analysis. So, all right, well, with that, the weekly assignment for this week, the article that we're going to be reviewing, or that you're going to be reviewing, is Jeannie Palmer's article on exceptional human experiences and their disclosure. Now, some of you may already read this article, but this week you're going to analyze it from the particular perspective using the worksheet that I posted in class online. So pay attention to those different pieces that you're going to need to cover there. A lot of people don't realize actually that this article was an integral inquiry piece. William Braud was her advisor when she did her dissertation, and then they ended up writing articles together after her graduation. And she even continues the work in this area. So the discussion for this week, so the discussion online, Please post regarding these different items. What additional aspects of integration did William Braud discuss that I did not mention here? I didn't cover everything, obviously. So what other ways might you envision integrating various tools or methods within a study? So maybe there's some things that you can think of that Dr. Braud did not cover in the chapter. What topics might be best, or might you choose if you were putting together an integral inquiry? And finally, as always, what questions do you have after reading this chapter and the article? I look forward to seeing you all online, and thank you for your great participation in weeks 1 and 2, and look forward to continuing that in week 3. All right, take care.